Welcome back to Mr. Orth's Lip Classroom. Today, a general look at APA formatting for research assignments. This applies to students in the grades 7, 8, and 9, both in STEM and outside of STEM. Some general formatting ideas. Remember to use the following formatting for all typed assignments. 1-inch margins on all 4 sides, 12-point Times New Roman font, double spacing between lines, left alignment except for title pages and headings, and indent 1/2 inch for the first line of each new paragraph. Please remember also to use italicized text only when required for titles or specialized words. Avoid bold and underlined text at all times. Some ways to make this simpler in case you've already started a document and need to make some changes. Don't forget you can use the Control and A keys, selected together at the same time, to select all text. Any format changes made at that point in time with the whole text selected will apply to all parts of that document. Likewise, you can highlight only certain parts of the text and actually make the changes just to those sections. Note that any and all bold text can be easily removed by clicking twice on the bold button once all text is selected. Likewise, underlining can also be removed by clicking twice on that once everything is selected. Later on we'll talk about reverse indents. That's also especially important. If you're doing title pages, for example, or headings, typically you want to go ahead and center those. Also, if you're not familiar with the find and replace function of the edit menu, it actually allows us to the computer to actually find everything for you and replace it for you. For example, let's say you did something simple like you misspelled a name but misspelled it throughout. Now spell check doesn't necessarily catch those name misspellings. Or you forgot to capitalize something or shouldn't have capitalized something. Maybe you are used to putting a period and then 2 spaces after that as opposed to only 1 space, which is usually considered correct these days. When you go to the find function, you can go ahead and actually type that in and I'll show you how to change that. Let's look at how to use the find and replace function. In a Google Doc, for example, we're going to click on the menus and we sign under the edit menu, find and replace. You also can use Control H to get there. So for example, if I realize on my document here I have last name and I have spelled it twice where it's actually 1 word. I need to replace that with 2 words. So I specify what I want. Make sure that capitalization, spacing, punctuation, all of it matters. And you want to match the case. So it only looks for ones that are capitalized but there's no space there. I can click on replace and it'll do it one at a time and we can go through it each way throughout, or I can replace all and it fixes both of those formats you saw behind there. It's a really quick, easy way to save yourself some time and not have to go through and look for everything individually. Alright, with some general formatting out of the way, let's talk about works cited pages. Works cited pages should not be confused with bibliographies. A bibliography is simply a list of sources related to the topic. These may or may not have been used by the author or have been part of anything having to do with that particular document or article you're reading. It's simply a bunch of information that you could look at if you wanted to learn more. A works cited page is more precise. This only lists information for sources actually used by the author in the work you've already read. In fact, each source on this page should have been mentioned in the text of the document, hence the fact that there are works that have already been cited in the text. In both cases, details necessary for finding a specific source are included in the entry for that source, meaning if someone looks at that works cited page or that bibliography, they should have enough information in order to actually go and find that document for themselves. Some general information. If you look at the works cited page, first you want to make sure to use reverse indent. The first line of each entry is aligned on the left margin, but all following lines for that entry should be indented 1/2 inch. With the works cited text selected, move the tabs in the top ruler to appear like this. So if you look here, you're going to see that you have actually a blue bar, rectangle here, and that's going to be straddle that gray and white line there, which is the margin. You see here, this is 1 inch into the actual document. You want the blue arrow to actually appear to be pointing right down on that line that says 1/2 inch. And that's going to indicate for you that the top line is going to be of any entry all the way over to the left-hand margin, and the second line and all lines going down from that are going to be moved over. Think of it like tabs on a file folder. We want to be able to page through that more quickly in order to actually find the information. We don't want to read every single line in order to find which document we're talking about. Also, make sure you alphabetize your list of works cited by whatever is first to the entry, usually the author's last name. Again, there should be a rhyme or reason to how you find things in there. For more info, or for examples or other types of sources in APA format, make sure you visit the OWL at Purdue University. And yes, I see I have a typo there. Thanks for noticing. Works cited. Some things you need for works cited citations in APA. The author, publication date, source title, other info, and web info. First for the author. In general, you list the author's name first in an entry, starting with the last name, but then you only use initials for first and middle names. Rarely in APA style do you actually use whole first names. For some reason, you only use initials. If you have anywhere from 1 to 3 authors, list them in the order they appear on the title page of the document. Think of it like top billing on a movie poster. That character, that actor is going to get paid more, probably because they're intended to draw more for marketing. So they get first billing. Same thing's true on published information. So we list those in order using the and symbol instead of the word and commas to separate each entry. If you have more than 3 authors for any one source, I recommend you see your teacher for a specific case. Again, we're just getting started with APA. There's a lot more to it, but this should get you a good place to get launching from for future work. Next thing you need for a works cited entry is publication date. Place the publication year inside parentheses with a period after the closing parenthesis. The example here is you have the year, with parenthesis before and after, and the period comes after, indicating we've finished that part of the entry. Note, you typically don't use month or date unless you have multiple works cited by the same author or a combination of authors, or if that particular document was published more than once in that particular year. So for example, if you have a newspaper, you're going to want to have the exact date, because we're assuming the newspaper was published every week or every day. Whereas a magazine or periodical might only be published 12 months out of the year, in which case you might include it then. In general, for web documents, you just go ahead and put the actual year that is copyrighted. The source title. There's 2 parts to the source title. If it's published by itself, such as a book or documentary or a movie, then that's next in the entry and is typed in italics because it's published by itself. If, however, it's published as part of something else, such as a chapter in a book, article in a periodical, or a page in a website, then the source title, that specific title, is next. Plain text, no quotation marks. Then whatever it's part of or whatever it's published in or on, such as the name of the book or the periodical or the website, that follows, and that's going to be italicized. Other things you need to know for a works cited entry. For a book, we'll also need to know the publication location and publisher name. You use the actual city, comma, and the 2-letter initial or abbreviation for the actual state, a colon, and then the actual name of the company. For a journal, other formal periodical, and this doesn't happen that often anymore, but for things you might be looking for, but you would need the volume number and issue number. Okay, so in this case, we have the name of the magazine Time, the volume number 23, issue number 14, then the page numbers following that. Again, very few things are published by issues anymore within a volume. These days, if you're going to have a number here, it's going to be the actual volume. And yes, there should have been a comma there. Good job, Orth. Also, web info. Anything you found online, you want to have the words retrieved from and the full URL or the web address. Some examples. First example here of a book entry, you have a single author entry. Author, initials, year, period, title in italics, city, state, publisher. You have multiple authors here, good example of that. Again, you have a comma after the period, next name, comma after the period, ampersand, which is the and symbol, and then 1 period there. You don't use 2 periods at that spot. Year, period, title, publisher. If you find a periodical entry online, for example, again, name, publication, year, title of the article, not in quotation marks, title of the journal in italics, source information, and yeah, that should have been italics too. I'm making a lot of mistakes today. But at least you have something better than having listened to me in class. And I made up a URL at the end of it, just to remind you that even if you find it online and you have its information, if you get it online, you make sure you mention that you found it online by giving the URL. A number you're going to be troubled because you didn't find all the information you needed to do a works cited entry. So here's what to do in some of those cases. If no dates provided, there's no copyright date even at the bottom of the website, then use N period D period in place of the year. There's an example at the bottom of the page. If no individual author is named, use the name of the organization or the company associated with the source, such as Indiana University or the Freedom Hall Association. That's called a corporate author. You find it more and more these days when an organization doesn't want an individual to get credit for writing something, but rather the whole group is going to be responsible for it, especially if it's on their particular web page. If no individual nor a group is given credit as author, then use the title as the entry label, meaning you put the title of the article first. But only use that after you exhausted every other means to find the necessary information. The example we have here might look very familiar to some of what you are doing for your assignment. No author, so we put the title of the article in front. There's no date included on there, and all we have is retrieved from. We don't need to put the name of the article twice at the front and after the date. In-text citations. We want to do works cited pages first because we need to know what's going to be first in the entry if it's author or title of some type. Once we have that, we need to go back into our actual document and figure out how we're going to let our audience know as they read through the pages of our document where the information came from. These are called in-text citations. Remember that every piece of information that you do not personally observe or create needs to credit the source in which you found it. If you don't do that, you're guilty of making the audience believe that you created the information without any help or other sources. As you probably had told you at least once, that's the kind of thing that can be construed as plagiarism and can have much more significant consequences than losing points in a junior high or middle school language arts class. Oftentimes when students are initially learning the content, meaning APA formatting and in-text citations, both quotations and paraphrases are going to use citations with page or paragraph numbers. Eventually, there's room to move and have some flexibility with that, but for right now, let's cite everything. The most common way to actually do in-text citations is to put it at the end of a sentence. So when we do this, the citation actually appears after the last word of the sentence before the period. The example here, and again, totally made up statement. The last word of the sentence is period. Here is backyard, and the period ordinally would go there. Because it's cited, we put the citation here, which I'll explain in the next slide, inside the period because it's part of a sentence. If you had a quote here, for example, the quotation marks would come after the last letter of the last word, then a space, then the citations, and then the period after that as well. All right, so what do you actually put in an in-text citation? Well, first you want to use whatever's first in your entry, usually the author's last name, in place of the source letter from your information gathering step for students who are following my assignment. So we need to go back through and replace all those in all those pieces of information that are still there. Remember, you didn't take off that source information, and it always should be in parentheses when you were doing the outlining step. Next, you want to make sure you put a comma between the author last name, between the year published, and the page or paragraph number. Again, page or paragraph number, not both. If it comes from a source that's PDF where you saw an image of the page or the actual hard copy page, that's the page number. If it was an online document, and the number of pages would change if you zoomed in or zoomed out, then you actually use the paragraph symbol. Using Google Docs, this paragraph symbol here, that you're going to have to insert as a special character, because Google Docs, as of the time of this publication or this recording, doesn't have a new paragraph symbol. The nice thing about APA is the first time you use that source, you need to put the year in there. After that, you don't have to. Now, when you get more precise later on, you might have a professor or teacher say you need to use the year the first time in each paragraph. But for our purposes at this stage of the game, we're going to simplify that by actually having you just do the author last name, the comma, the paragraph symbol, and the number, or the P period space and the number. And again, period comes after both of those because it's at the end of a sentence. Again, there are other ways to do this, but that's a great place to start when you're learning this new content and skill. Next steps. As you're working on this, seek feedback from knowledgeable experts. They need to know APA style, not MLA or some other document. And it can't be when they were in college 10 or 15 years ago, because APA changes every few years. Trust me, I have to buy a new copy of the APA manual every time it comes out, and it's not cheap. So when you're doing this, get feedback, not just your teachers, but your classmates who seem to grasp that. How do you know? Because they've had their work checked by a teacher, and they've earned all credit for it. Also, when you're locating online resources for APA format, things to help you, such as the example of this image from the OWL at Purdue University. OWL, by the way, stands for Online Writing Lab. Be sure to identify your precise needs. If you want APA format, what do you want to know? Do you want to know in-text citations, the basics, or about authors? Do you want to know about reference lists? That's your works cited page. In terms of books, other print sources, electronic sources, other non-print sources. For example, those folks working with documentaries and such. Stay with it, ask for help, and take your time with it. Good hunting.